Good morning.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you today?
I'm doing great.
So, you are the expert on Disney, huh?
One of the experts, but yes.
Okay. So, um, and I got an interesting tidbit. I'm in Kansas City,
Okay.
and it was the original, like, okay, so Walt Disney was from Marceline, which is north of here.
Yep.
And my one of my best friends of all time, his my son's godfather grew up there and
hmm
like has a big history. But anyway, when Walt went to art school at the Kansas City Art Institute, there was a block where he had his first studio, and it's kind of dilapidated. And I'm hoping that Kansas City turns that into something.
So I spoke in Kansas City a year and a half ago. I actually spoke at the Hometown Museum in Marceline, but I also spoke in Kansas City, and a car had just run into the building where Laugh-O-Gram Studios was upstairs.
Okay.
And I managed to go in and get a brick from Laugh-O-Gram, and I have that here in my home.
Wow.
And it's interesting because Disney this year is all in on the 100th anniversary of the company, but it's also the 100th anniversary of Laugh-O-Gram going bankrupt. And Walt, as a result of the bankruptcy, deciding to leave Kansas City, boarding a train, coming to California, and he left Kansas City from Union Station with $40 a single suitcase and a one-way ticket.
Wow. That's wild. I had no idea. There's so
Yeah.
much history that goes into all of that.
Oh,
So,
oh, there is. So if
yeah.
you go down to Union Station, they actually have a display that talks about that.
Okay, I need to look around then more. I mean, I go in there quite a bit, so I need to take a look. Where are you located?
I'm in Riverside, California, about 30 miles from Disneyland.
Okay, all right, excellent. Excellent. Have you been there your whole life?
No, born in Reno, Nevada. My dad was in the Air Force, so we moved to Virginia, North Carolina, Panhandle of Florida. Went to college in Southern Mississippi. Grad school, started my career in Northern California, then Southern Arizona, Hawaii, now Southern California. I've moved around a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like it. All right. So you got a nomadic life. So before we get kind of lost in all of the timelines here, I want to begin with COVID. And the last 3 years was quite a thing. How did you survive it? And how has it changed the way that you look at life and do things now?
So, I mean, COVID was a challenge for everybody, right?
Yeah.
And I was still in my higher education career at the time, and I was diagnosed and went through a second brain surgery during summer of 2020. So, everybody had a sucky 2020, and then I doubled down on it because I had a brain surgery in the middle of the pandemic. And I had this great side gig of speaking, and I didn't do any speaking that because nobody was doing events. Now, at the same time, it was a great summer to spend 2 months recovering from brain surgery. I didn't really miss any gigs because there weren't any gigs to miss.
Yeah.
Um, but the end result of all of that was when I went back to work, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I eventually left my 22-year career in higher ed, and now I write and speak full time.
So let's kind of get a little bit more into exactly what you do now. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day, which I'm sure they would be really, really happy about. And one of the kids asks you, "What do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
I go to Disneyland, I go to Walt Disney World, and I write and speak about how theme parks can motivate and inspire you to follow your dreams and live your best life.
It's interesting. I'm going to take a slight deviation here. My son, who's 18, he's on the autism spectrum. His favorite place in the world is Worlds of Fun here in Kansas City, and he works there. He's gone there consistently. I mean, the first time we went, we were on a roller coaster that just scared him so bad. I didn't think he was ever going to get on a roller coaster again. He had the glasses and they flew off, and I hadn't been to a roller coaster in a long, long time or a theme park. So, yeah, I just forgot how powerful they can be. But anyways, at this point right now, based on his sensory issues and just who he is, I'll sit behind him on a roller coaster and the whole world's like moving and everything's loud and all this, but he's totally calm. Like it's like it just does the reverse for him. But it's
Hmm.
funny you say that because his dream is to run the big Mamba roller coaster there. He just absolutely loves it, loves everybody, loves the whole thing. It is his therapy place. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's crazy. It's great.
yeah. The Imagineers at Disney create what they call the architecture of reassurance, and they build in this idea that the world is a safe place, the world is an okay place, and everything's going to be okay. That the world can right itself.
Yeah. So what did you want to be when you were in the third grade?
Oh, that is a fantastic question. A writer, which I've managed to fulfill, and a disc jockey, which I guess the closest I get to that is podcast interviews.
There you go. So you're living the dream. So
I am.
when did this first moment of falling in love with both Disney and theme parks begin for you?
So falling in love with, I went to Walt Disney World when I was 10. And I immediately knew that if there was any sort of heaven on this side of breathing, that had to be it. But my first trip to Disneyland, I was 25, and I actually hated that first experience.
Wow.
I was underwhelmed based on my experiences as a kid in Florida. And we arrived too late. I wanted to get on Star Tours. That was the newest, latest, greatest attraction. The line was more than 3 hours long. By the time we were done with that, now it's the afternoon. It's too hot. It's too crowded. Just a miserable experience. Uh, but I stayed in California, and as I talked to people, I mean, they just freaking loved the place, like way deeper than anybody in Florida, because it's a locals park here. And I'm like, okay, well, why does everyone else love it? And I'd rather go to the dentist than go back to Disneyland. And so that got me curious, and I started reading up on Walt and discovered not born successful, none of us are, right? Difficult relationship with his father, which I could identify with. More failures than successes, starting with the bankruptcy in Kansas City, and lost his first cartoon character, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. No one believed in Snow White. I mean, even at 53, no one believed in his dream for Disneyland to include his own wife and his own brother. And I've always sort of rooted for the underdog, and discovered Walt, despite these successes, was this proverbial underdog. And I fell in love with that story and came to realize he built the park for the purpose of telling stories, that if you actually pay attention to what's going on, there's stories that are challenging us to then go out and live our own great story. And I fell in love with it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Um, so would you say that your hero in life is Walt, or who would be your hero?
Yeah, I mean, Walt's my hero, because he gave us a place that we can escape to, but I think he also gave us a place that serves as an example for, again, living a better story, um, and leveling up our own life personally, professionally. Um, you know, Everything can be better if we follow the example of how Walt led, what Walt created, recognizing the importance of story, and not this happily ever after ending that I think most of us seek, but rather every great story requires conflict. And so if you're bored with your life, if you're bored with your story, it's because you're not doing hard things and embracing conflict.
So I've always heard that did Walt get frozen? Is that what's the story now? Is that true?
No, that's absolutely not true. In fact, that was a very painful rumor for his family.
Yeah.
Walt was a visionary, and very much a futurist, which is sort of where that rumor comes from. And there was never a public memorial or funeral when he died. He was diagnosed with lung cancer in November of 1966 and given 6 months to 2 years to live, and lasted only 5 weeks. And so his death was sort of a surprise and somewhat sudden. And again, there wasn't ever a public memorial or a public funeral, and he was cremated. So the rumors around that are completely untrue and completely unsubstantiated, but they're rooted in this idea around Walt, with Tomorrowland and Epcot, and his visions around the future. But he was absolutely cremated.
So if you could meet Walt, say he comes back and you could talk to him, what would you ask him?
I would want to know, what does he think about the fact that he had an idea for creating this place where parents and children could have fun together, i.e. Disneyland. He sets out to do it and has to overcome obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. No one believes in it, to include his own wife and his own brother. It's going to be shuttered, bankrupt, and forgotten 6 months or less. And today, the sun never sets on a Disney park anywhere in the world. I mean, in Orlando, it's the nation's largest single site employer and the world's most popular vacation destination. When they had to shut down in September due to Hurricane Ian, the company lost $80 million a day. And I would just say, what do you think of that, Walt? And again, I know it's not exactly what Walt would have wanted. I know they're not doing things exactly the way Walt would have done them. But man, I mean, he would just have to be really stinking proud that it's become what it's become. And he went from, bankrupt 100 years ago to the world's largest entertainment company today.
There's a lot of people, especially the higher up you go the food chain, there's people that demonize and have criticisms, and you hear all of these things about Disney. How do you counter that? How do you counter people that have these negative notions and make sure that they understand that they preserve this idea that you have of this company that's done so much that really brings more joy than anything else to people?
Well, I mean, first of all, some of the criticism at this point, maybe not necessarily against Walt per se, but against the company,
Yeah.
um, is valid. And so you have to sort of separate, Disney the man, i.e. Walt, and Disney the brand, which is a company today that, at the end of the day, answers to a bottom line and stockholders. And they're not perfect, and they don't always do the right thing and make the right decision. But the truth of the matter is, Walt wasn't perfect either, and didn't always do the right thing and make the right decision either. Um, but then secondly, I taught a college course on the history of Disneyland, which sounds a little bit absurd, but if you want to know what's going on in the country, take a look at what's going on in the Disney parks from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond. Watch the opening day broadcast from July 17th, 1955, which was shown on ABC television and viewed by some 90 million Americans that day. It was the largest live broadcast to date. And as people walk in, everybody's white. Everybody has 2.5 kids. Everybody's dressed, having just come from church. It might not have been who America was in 1955, but it's who America thought we were, or who America wanted to portray that we were, because we're 6 months away from Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. There's no diversity. There's no inclusion. except for Sammy Davis Jr., who is a celebrity, or Aunt Jemima, who's cast as a stereotypical cast member. That's it. And so today, as Disney gets caught up in a lot of the agenda around wokeness and, maybe being too inclusive or too diverse, well, that's a lot of the narrative in our country. That's a lot of the agenda in our country. So again, if you want to know what's happening in the United States, take a look at what's happening in the parks, and the narrative is a mirror and a reflection.
So, as Dr. Disney, how much do you learn about this empire on a regular basis? You would think there perhaps might be a wall, but is it kind of like space? It just keeps expanding and there's no stop?
I I'm constantly reading, constantly learning, and there is almost always something new to discover. It's unbelievable to me um, how much is out there, because the parks are so massive, they're filled with so much detail, and then you add in the movies, you add in the cartoons. I mean, it's endless. And and people, you talk to families who grew up going to the parks, and they have their own stories, and they have their own memories, and they have their own traditions and their own connections. And it really is just sort of a rite of passage for a lot of people, to go to a Disney park, or to take their kids or to take their grandkids. So I'm constantly learning new facts, new trivia, new information. So like I'll throw this out there, and I've known this for a long time. You've eaten a bag of Doritos, right?
Mhm.
Invented at Disneyland.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, most people are shocked by that. Probably
Wow.
my favorite fun fact.
I love I love fun facts.
Yeah.
How many times have you been to each of the respective parks in your life up to this point?
I've been to Disneyland. Gosh, I mean, I was there last night. I've been to Disneyland well over 900 times.
Wow.
And I've been to Walt Disney World, despite living here on the West Coast now for, gosh, since the 1980s. Probably close to 100 times now.
Wow.
In fact, I'm flying to Walt Disney World on Wednesday.
Wow. So, what is the ultimate motivator for you? Every day you get up, you're, this is a focal point of your life. What is the chief motivator to live this life that you have, loving Disney?
So that's a great question. This is what motivates me, and to some degree, this is what haunts me. Walt's idea for creating the dream of building Disneyland came when he took his two young daughters, Diane and Sharon, out on what he called Daddy's Day on a Saturday afternoon to a merry-go-round in Griffith Park here in Los Angeles. And they were on the merry-go-round. He was sitting on a park bench. And he had an idea, a crazy thought. He began to dream of a place where parents and children could have fun together. Well, on average, we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. It's why we're completely overwhelmed. It's why we're exhausted at the end of every day. And I am absolutely convinced that when it comes to our own life, when it comes to our own organizations, when it comes to our teams, we have ideas and thoughts and dreams. It might not change the world the way Walt's did, but it could at least change our world. The challenge is, and Walt said it, all of our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them. Walt got up off of that park bench, and despite all of the doubters and all of the naysayers and all of the resistance, took action and made that dream come true. And I'm haunted by this idea that there are people sitting on their proverbial park benches who can make a huge difference in their world, if not all of our worlds. They just need that motivation, that inspiration, that encouragement to get up and take action.
So in your life, what are you the proudest of that you've done?
Um, That's a great question too. So when I first taught my History of Disneyland class, which, the Mickey Mouse idea, right? But I pitched it to the university. They signed off on it, worked on it for a year, gave the first lecture. Students loved it because, again, our ideas matter, and it's not just to us. You know, people love Disneyland. Walt's been gone for more than 55 years, and yet people are there every day, right? So the things that you want to do, they have an impact on, others beyond yourself. The very next day, I was diagnosed with the first of what would be two life-threatening brain tumors, and they wanted to operate immediately. And that would result in a 2-month recovery process, which meant the course would be canceled. And, who knows what happens after that point. And I refused to have the surgery so that I could continue to teach the class, because the class wasn't really about the amusement park. The class was really about, if you want to succeed, if you want to accomplish something, then you have got to face adversity, confront conflict, and overcome obstacles. And this was an opportunity to not just teach that lesson, but live that lesson. And I'm proud that I was willing to do that. And that's what resulted in getting through the first semester of the class. And then on the other side of that, writing the first of 2 best-selling books. And ultimately, it gave me the career that I have today. And I hear from people all over the country, all over the world, thanking me for the content, because it's helped them in their own lives and their own careers.
You're covering probably one of the biggest success stories I would think that America has brought the world, which is Disney. And we obviously know what the legacy of that is. That's what you do. But what do you hope your legacy is?
That somebody who was sitting on a great idea takes action and, again, changes their world, or maybe even our world. Or better yet, I got an email a couple of weeks ago, because I write a blog every single Wednesday called Wednesdays with Walt. And I did a piece on, after Walt lost Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Walt once said we can never forget it all started with a mouse, but it didn't. It started with a rabbit, and Walt lost the rabbit in a contract dispute with Universal. And he's facing bankruptcy for a second time. But rather than giving up, on the train ride home from New York, where the whole meeting took place, he pulls out a pad of paper, sketches out the first Mickey Mouse story. But before he ever boarded the train home, he sends a telegram to his brother Roy and says, "Don't worry, everything okay." And I did a whole piece on, whenever you're in a crisis, or, heading into a crisis or coming out of a crisis, rather than worrying and fretting and obsessing and ruminating on it, what if you just said to yourself every single morning, "Don't worry, everything okay"? And I heard from a particular reader who said, my life partner of 27 years just left me, and I've spent the last 2 weeks telling myself, "Don't worry, everything okay." And I'm in a much better mental space for the last 2 weeks than I was, before reading this article. And those kinds of things just mean the world to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So if anyone wants to get your books, learn more about you, anything related to your world, your blog, anything, what do they do?
So you can find me at thewisdomofwalt.com, and you can sign up for Wednesdays with Walt, 100% free, and you'll get some inspiration, motivation every single Wednesday. And the books are available on Amazon. Again, Wisdom of Walt, Leadership Lessons from the Happiest Place on Earth. Beyond the Wisdom of Walt, which is about Walt Disney World, life lessons from the most magical place on earth. And again, you can go to my website, thewisdomofwalt.com, send me an email, signed up for the blog, and would be happy to answer any questions from anyone.
So for all the times that you go to the park, you have to be a celebrity. They have to be rolling out the carpet for you. Do they know you well? How does that work?
Well, I do meet up with people there every now and then. Someone will say, "Hey, I heard you at a keynote," or "I got your book," or whatever. But I go just as a guest. I go just as a fan.
Nice. Very nice. This is fascinating. Jeffrey, thank you for opening up your story. Best of luck with everything. And hopefully they can turn that area in Kansas City into something. I've just been astonished all these years
I
that it
know.
hasn't been kind of a mini park kind of a thing with, especially with the adventurous spirit that Kansas City, especially lately, has had. We're getting a World Cup. We just had the NFL draft. There's a lot of things that we're entering a big stage for. And I think this Walt Disney experience locally would be kind of the big bang nexus of everything starting.
Yeah, you've got some great pieces in Kansas City. I've had the privilege of speaking there 2 or 3 times. And at one point, Walt talked about putting an entertainment amusement something in Marceline, and he died before that ever came to fruition.
Wow.
But yeah, folks should come to Kansas City, make the 2.5 hour drive to Marceline. A great destination for Disney fans.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. This has been great, man. Thank you for opening up. I appreciate it and best of luck with everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.